Hello there and welcome to the Sleepy Science Place. I'm so glad you found your way here tonight. Maybe you've had one of those days where your mind keeps circling back to the same thoughts, or maybe you're simply someone who finds comfort in the grand, slow stories of the universe rather than counting sheep. Either way, you're exactly where you need to be. Tonight, we're going to drift through something truly remarkable, the story of life itself. Not the frantic, hurried version you might have learned in school, but the gentle, patient unfolding that's been happening for billions of years. We'll explore evolution not as a race or a competition, but as a quiet conversation between living things and the world around them. A conversation written in starlight and stone, in deep time and shallow pools, in the curve of a wing and the whisper of leaves. There's something deeply calming about evolution when you really settle into it. It reminds us that change doesn't have to be sudden or frightening. It can be so slow, so gradual, that entire mountain ranges rise and fall in the time it takes for a single meaningful shift to occur. And yet, here we are, the descendants of that patience, carrying stories in our very cells that stretch back to the first trembling spark of life in ancient seas. So tonight, let yourself relax completely. Get comfortable under your blankets. Adjust your pillow just the way you like it, and know that there's nowhere else you need to be. If you enjoy these sleepy journeys through science and wonder, consider subscribing and leaving a gentle like. It helps others find their way here too, to this quiet corner of curiosity and rest. But truly, there's no pressure. Just let yourself be here, breathing softly, as we explore the most soothing truths about how life came to be and continues to unfold, even now, even as you drift toward sleep. Are you ready? Then let's begin this gentle journey together, back through deep time, where every fact is a lullaby and every truth a comfort. Life on Earth began somewhere around 3.5 billion years ago, though the exact moment remains beautifully mysterious. Imagine our planet then, a world of warm, shallow seas, volcanic islands emerging from mist, and skies that held no oxygen yet, just nitrogen and carbon dioxide and water vapor hanging heavy in the air. In those ancient pools, perhaps in cracks near hydrothermal vents deep underwater, molecules began to do something extraordinary. They started copying themselves, not with any intention or purpose, just simple chemistry following gentle rules like water finding its way downhill. But that simple act, replication, was the first whisper of life, the first time the universe learned to remember itself. And from that quiet beginning, everything else would slowly, patiently unfold across eons of time. For the first 2 billion years of life on Earth, nothing lived on land at all. The entire story of life was written in water, in seas and oceans, in tidal pools and deep trenches where sunlight never reached. Single-celled organisms drifted in currents, divided, evolved, and gradually became more complex, all beneath the waves. The land was bare stone and volcanic ash, a silent world without even a whisper of green. Can you imagine it? A whole planet alive only in its waters, while continents stood empty under alien skies. Life was in no hurry. It had all the time in the world to perfect itself in the gentle buoyancy of water, before taking on the harsh challenge of gravity and air. Sometimes the most profound changes require the longest preparation, and life was preparing, quietly, for the moment it would finally reach toward the sun from solid ground. The first organisms to produce oxygen as a waste product were cyanobacteria, simple creatures that still exist today, virtually unchanged. They appeared roughly 2.5 billion years ago and began the Great Oxidation Event. Though event makes it sound sudden when it actually took hundreds of millions of years. These tiny beings, no larger than a speck of dust, slowly transformed the entire atmosphere of our planet. They breathed in carbon dioxide and sunlight and exhaled oxygen, one microscopic breath at a time, until the air itself became something new. Most life at the time found oxygen toxic. It was a poison to them, and many species went extinct. But this catastrophe opened space for new forms of life that could use oxygen's powerful energy. Even now, when you take a deep breath, you're breathing the legacy of those ancient, patient bacteria who remade the world without ever knowing what they were creating. Evolution has no direction and no goal. It isn't climbing toward perfection or complexity. It's simply life responding to the immediate moment, generation after generation, in whatever way allows survival and reproduction. Sometimes that means becoming more complex, developing eyes or brains or social structures, but just as often it means becoming simpler, shedding what isn't needed. Parasites, for instance, often evolve to lose organs and systems they no longer require. Cave fish lose their eyes over countless generations in darkness. There's a deep peace in understanding that evolution isn't a ladder we're climbing, but more like a river branching into countless streams, each finding its own way through the landscape. Nothing is higher or lower, better or worse. Everything alive right now is equally evolved, equally fitted to this moment, each species carrying the same unbroken chain stretching back to the beginning. You, and the bird outside your window, and the bacteria in your gut, all ancient beyond measure. You share about 60% of your DNA with a banana. That fact often gets shared as something funny or surprising, but when you really sit with it, it's quietly profound. It means that you and that fruit on your counter had a common ancestor billions of years ago, some single-celled organism from which both plant and animal kingdoms eventually diverged. The basic machinery of life, how cells divide, how they produce energy, how they read genetic instructions, is so fundamentally similar across all living things because we all inherited it from the same source. You're not separate from the rest of life on Earth. You're woven into it at the deepest level, related to everything that grows and moves and breathes. The tree outside is a distant cousin. The mushrooms in the forest are family. And somewhere in your cells, you carry molecular echoes of that original ancestor, still faithfully copying itself after all this time, still saying, "Continue," in a chemical whisper that has never stopped since life began. Evolution works on a timescale so vast that it makes human history feel like a single heartbeat. If you compressed all of Earth's existence into a single 24-hour day, the planet would form at midnight, but the first simple life wouldn't appear until around 4 in the morning. Complex cells with nuclei wouldn't show up until 4 p.m. The first animals would emerge from the seas around 9 p.m. Dinosaurs would rule the Earth for about an hour from 10:30 to 11:40 p.m. All of human history, every civilization, every person who ever lived, every story ever told, would fit into the last few seconds before midnight. Understanding this vastness can be strangely comforting. It reminds us that there's no rush, that life has always moved slowly, patiently, without hurry. Your own worries and concerns, valid as they are, exist in a universe that breathes in geological time, where mountains are temporary and change is measured in millions of years. You can let yourself rest in that perspective, soft and small, and held by deep time. The human eye, often held up as a marvel of design, actually evolved dozens of times independently across different branches of life. Octopuses have eyes remarkably similar to ours, but their ancestors diverged from ours more than 500 million years ago, long before eyes existed at all. This means eyes aren't just one invention. They're a solution that life discovered over and over again in different ways, because the advantage of detecting light is so profound that evolution tends to stumble upon it repeatedly. Some eyes are simple pits of light-sensitive cells. Others use tiny mirrors instead of lenses. Some detect colors we can't imagine, extending into infrared or ultraviolet. The mantis shrimp has 16 types of color receptors where we have only 3, seeing a world of hues beyond our comprehension. Each eye is a different answer to the same question: what is the shape of light? And life has been patiently asking that question, refining its answers, for hundreds of millions of years. Nothing in evolution is wasted, but everything can be repurposed. Bird feathers, those delicate structures that enable flight, didn't originally evolve for flying at all. The earliest feathers appeared on small dinosaurs millions of years before any creature took to the air. They likely served as insulation first, keeping small warm-blooded bodies at stable temperatures, or as display structures for attracting mates, colorful and ornamental. Flight came later, almost as an afterthought, when some species discovered that these structures could also catch air. Wings themselves evolved at least 4 separate times, in insects, in pterosaurs, in birds, and in bats, each using completely different anatomical structures repurposed into flight. Evolution is the universe's ultimate improviser, taking what already exists and gently, incrementally, discovering new possibilities. The organs and structures in your own body have similar stories: jaw bones that were once gill supports, inner ear bones that were once parts of the jaw, everything borrowed and transformed through deep time. Your appendix, that small organ often dismissed as vestigial and useless, may actually serve a purpose after all. Recent research suggests it might act as a safe house for beneficial gut bacteria, a place where helpful microbes can shelter during illness or infection, and then repopulate the intestines afterward. But even if it were truly useless, that would tell a story too. A story of how our ancestors once needed it to digest tough plant materials, and how we gradually shifted to different diets that made it less necessary. Evolution doesn't clean up after itself. It doesn't remove things neatly once they're no longer needed. Instead, structures may shrink over millions of years, or get repurposed, or simply remain as quiet witnesses to a different past. Whales have tiny hip bones buried deep in their bodies, remnants of the legs their land-dwelling ancestors used to walk on beaches before returning to the sea. These echoes of other times are beautiful in their own way, proof that nothing simply is, but everything became. Life almost ended several times. In the past 500 million years alone, there have been 5 mass extinctions, moments when the vast majority of species on Earth vanished. The worst was the Permian extinction about 250 million years ago, when volcanic eruptions in what is now Siberia spewed greenhouse gases for thousands of years, warming oceans, acidifying waters, and depleting oxygen. 96% of marine species disappeared. 70% of land vertebrates went extinct. Life came terrifyingly close to ending entirely. And yet from that devastation, the survivors slowly, patiently rebuilt. The world that emerged afterward was different, strange, new, and eventually it would give rise to dinosaurs, then birds, then flowering plants, then eventually us. Even catastrophe in deep time becomes a door to new possibilities. Life, it seems, is remarkably stubborn. It finds a way, not through strength or planning, but through sheer persistence and the mathematical certainty that some organism somewhere will survive and carry forward. The slowest evolving organism we know of is a bacterium called Candidatus desulphorutis audex viator, living 2 miles underground in a South African gold mine, completely isolated from the surface world. It gets its energy from radioactive decay in the surrounding rocks, breathes sulfur instead of oxygen, and has remained virtually unchanged for millions of years. Down there in the dark, cut off from sunlight and the changing seasons, from ice ages and meteor strikes and all the drama of surface life, evolution simply paused. There was no pressure to change because nothing in its environment was changing. This little organism lives on geological time, patient beyond measure, proof that evolution isn't a constant forward motion but a response to need. When there is no need, life can simply be existing in its own present tense for eons, content with what it is. There's something deeply peaceful in that. The idea that sometimes the world asks nothing of you but to continue exactly as you are. Every living thing on Earth uses the same basic genetic code, the same molecular language to translate DNA into proteins. This universality is one of the most powerful pieces of evidence that all life shares a common ancestor. Whether you're looking at a sequoia tree, a blue whale, a mushroom, or a human being, the fundamental genetic instructions are read in essentially the same way. There are a few minor variations. Some organisms use slightly different punctuation in their genetic code, but the core language is shared. This means that scientists can take a gene from a jellyfish that makes it glow and insert it into a mouse, and the mouse will glow too, because both organisms speak the same ancient molecular language. You are made of words that were first written billions of years ago and have been passed down, copied and recopied, through an unbroken chain of life. Those words built your body, and they're still being read in every cell right now, quietly maintaining you as you rest, asking nothing in return. There are more species of beetles than any other group of animals on Earth, roughly 400,000 described species, though the true number may be much higher. When the British biologist J.B.S. Haldane was asked what his study of nature revealed about the Creator, he supposedly replied that God must have an inordinate fondness for beetles. But from an evolutionary perspective, beetles, incredible diversity makes perfect sense. They evolved a hard protective shell called an elytron that covers their flying wings, giving them armor that allows them to exploit environments other insects can't. They can burrow into wood, hide under bark, survive in deserts or freezing mountains or deep caves. Their body plan turned out to be remarkably adaptable, a solution that could be tweaked and modified in countless ways. Evolution doesn't have favorites. It simply rewards what works, and the beetle form has worked spectacularly well for over 300 million years, quietly diversifying into every niche imaginable, while humans were still hundreds of millions of years from existing. Your DNA is approximately 99% identical to that of a chimpanzee, our closest living relative. That remaining 1% makes all the difference in terms of specific traits, but the overwhelming genetic similarity is humbling and beautiful. It means that the last common ancestor we shared with chimpanzees lived only about 6 or 7 million years ago. Recent, in evolutionary terms, just a few ticks of deep time's clock. Since that ancestor's lineage split, one branch eventually led to modern chimps and bonobos, while the other led through various hominin species to us. Along that path, brains grew larger, bodies became better suited to walking upright, hands grew more dexterous, and language emerged. But underneath all those changes, the genetic architecture remained largely the same. You are, in the most literal sense, a modified ape, and there's something comforting in acknowledging that kinship, that continuity with the rest of the living world. Evolution is often misunderstood as survival of the fittest, but that phrase, coined by Herbert Spencer and later adopted by Darwin, can be misleading. Fitness in evolutionary terms doesn't mean strongest or fastest or smartest. It simply means best suited to a particular environment at a particular time. A small, weak animal that can hide effectively and reproduce successfully is more fit than a large, powerful one that can't find enough food. Sometimes fitness means cooperation rather than competition. Prairie dogs warn each other of predators with specific alarm calls. Vampire bats share blood with roost mates who didn't feed that night. Certain plants and fungi form partnerships where they exchange nutrients. Evolution doesn't optimize for individual success in isolation. It optimizes for whatever patterns lead to genes continuing into the next generation. And sometimes that means kindness, generosity, and collaboration are the strategies that work best. Nature isn't only red in tooth and claw. It's also filled with mutual aid, symbiosis, and communities that survive through care. Convergent evolution is when unrelated species independently evolve similar traits because they face similar environmental challenges. Dolphins and sharks look remarkably alike. Streamlined bodies, fins, similar swimming motions. But dolphins are mammals that return to the ocean while sharks are fish that never left. They arrived at similar body shapes from completely different starting points because that particular form works beautifully for fast swimming in open water. Similarly, birds, bats, and pterosaurs all evolved wings, but using different anatomical structures. Cacti in American deserts and euphorbias in African deserts look nearly identical: thick, water-storing stems, reduced leaves, similar spines. Yet they're not closely related at all. They just face the same problem: conserve water in extreme heat, and independently discovered the same solution. This happens over and over throughout evolution, suggesting that there are certain optimal designs for certain challenges, and life will eventually find them, given enough time and enough tries. The universe has favorite shapes and life patiently discovers them. The mitochondria in your cells, the tiny organelles that produce energy, were once free-living bacteria. About 2 billion years ago, a larger cell somehow engulfed one of these bacteria but didn't digest it. Instead, the two formed a partnership. The bacterium provided energy, and the larger cell provided protection and resources. Over time, this relationship became permanent. The bacterium lost many of its genes, transferring some to the host cell's nucleus, until it could no longer survive independently. Now, every complex cell in your body contains these descendants of ancient bacteria, still producing energy, still maintaining their own small loop of DNA separate from your chromosomal DNA. They're passed down only through the maternal line. Every mitochondrion in your body came from your mother, and hers from her mother, in an unbroken chain back through time. You are not a single organism but a community, a collaboration between different forms of life that merged so long ago they became inseparable. Even your individual cells tell a story of cooperation. There's a phenomenon in evolution called evolutionary lag, where organisms carry traits that were adaptive in past environments but are less helpful now. Human beings are filled with such traits. Our intense craving for sugar and fat made perfect sense when food was scarce and uncertain, but in modern environments with abundant processed foods, it leads to health problems. Our stress response, the fight-or-flight reaction, evolved for immediate physical dangers like predators, but now triggers constantly in response to emails, traffic, and social anxiety, for which the physical stress response isn't helpful at all. Lower back pain is common partly because our spines evolved for quadrupedal walking and were only recently, in evolutionary time, repurposed for upright posture. Evolution doesn't produce perfection, it produces good enough for now. And when environments change faster than species can adapt, there's a mismatch. Understanding this can bring a gentle compassion toward yourself. Your anxieties and struggles aren't personal failings. They're echoes of a different world, still resonating in your body, doing their best to navigate a present they weren't designed for. You're doing beautifully. There's no rush at all, nowhere you need to be, nothing you need to remember. These facts are here to wash over you like gentle waves, and if your mind drifts away, that's exactly right. That's what this space is for. Let your body sink a little deeper into comfort. Feel the weight of the blankets, the soft support beneath you. Evolution took billions of years to unfold, and you have all the time you need right now just to breathe and rest. The story will continue, but it asks nothing of you except to be here, to let the words flow past as you drift closer to sleep. The fossil record is astonishingly incomplete. Estimates suggest we've discovered less than 1% of all species that have ever existed. Most organisms that lived and died left no trace. Soft-bodied creatures rarely fossilize. Small bones scattered in forests decay without burial. The precise conditions needed for fossilization, rapid burial, mineral-rich water, geological stability for millions of years, are relatively rare. And even when fossils form, we have to happen to find them, exposing exactly the right layer of rock in the right place. Despite this, the fossils we have found tell a coherent story. They show transitions. Fish developing limbs, reptiles developing feathers, land mammals returning to the sea. They show geographical patterns. Marsupials diversifying in Australia, unique species on isolated islands. They show chronology. Simple organisms in ancient rocks, complex ones in recent ones. The story is fragmentary, like reading a novel where most pages are missing, but the remaining pages all support the same narrative, pointing to the same conclusion. That life has been transforming itself slowly for billions of years, and the evidence, though incomplete, is everywhere. Some species barely change over enormous spans of time. Horseshoe crabs have remained essentially unchanged for 450 million years. Coelacanths, ancient fish thought extinct until a living specimen was discovered in 1938, have looked the same for over 400 million years. These are sometimes called living fossils, though that term can be misleading. They have evolved, just not in dramatic external ways. Their body plans hit upon something that worked so well, was so perfectly suited to their environments, that there was no pressure to change. In environments that remain stable, evolution favors staying the same. It's a reminder that evolution isn't about progress towards something better, but about fit between organism and world. When that fit is already excellent and the world isn't changing much, why change at all? There's a deep wisdom in that kind of stability, in finding your place and simply being there, century after century, millennium after millennium, content with what works. Sexual reproduction is costly and complicated compared to asexual reproduction. It requires finding a mate, competing for one, often building elaborate structures or performing exhausting displays. It means an organism passes on only half its genes to each offspring instead of a full copy. So why did sex evolve and become so common? The prevailing theory is that sexual reproduction creates genetic diversity, shuffling genes in new combinations each generation, which helps populations adapt to changing environments and resist parasites. A sexually reproducing population is a moving target. The offspring aren't identical copies, so parasites and diseases can't easily specialize to attack them. Asexual organisms, producing genetic clones, are vulnerable to anything that learns to exploit them. Sex is evolution's way of staying unpredictable, of maintaining variation as a hedge against an uncertain future. It's a strategy born from deep time's recognition that the future will bring change, and flexibility is survival. Even in something as intimate as reproduction, the ancient logic of adaptation continues quietly working. The largest organism on Earth isn't a blue whale or a sequoia tree, but a fungus. In Oregon's Blue Mountains, a honey fungus called Armillaria solidipe spreads underground across roughly 2,000 acres, about 3 square miles. Most of it is invisible, a network of thread-like filaments called mycelium creeping through soil and under bark, digesting dead wood. What looks like separate mushrooms popping up across the forest are actually fruiting bodies of the same individual organism, all connected below ground, all sharing the same genetic material. This fungal network is estimated to be thousands of years old, quietly growing, extending, persisting through fires and ice ages and the rise and fall of tree generations. It reminds us that life doesn't always take forms we easily recognize. The most successful organisms aren't always the loudest or most visible. Sometimes they're the quiet ones, spreading slowly beneath notice, patient and persistent, enduring not through power but through steady presence. Many traits we think of as uniquely human exist in other species, just expressed differently. Tool use appears in chimps, crows, dolphins, and octopuses. Grief and mourning have been observed in elephants, who return to the bones of dead family members and touch them gently with their trunks. Orcas have been seen carrying dead calves for days, unwilling to let go. Empathy shows up in rats, who will free trapped companions even when there's no benefit to themselves. Play, laughter, culture, teaching, even basic counting and pattern recognition, all appear in various species. We're not separate from the rest of life by an unbridgeable gap. We're more like a branch that grew certain traits to great intensity, language, abstraction, cumulative culture, while retaining many capacities we share with others. Your capacity for kindness, for joy, for connection, these aren't human inventions. They're ancient inheritances, gifts from evolutionary ancestors who discovered that caring for each other helped everyone survive. When you feel love or compassion, you're participating in something older than humanity, something life has been practicing for millions of years. Color vision evolved multiple times and has been lost multiple times across different lineages. Most mammals have relatively poor color vision. Dogs and cats see a more muted palette than humans do. Because the mammalian ancestors who survived the age of dinosaurs were small, nocturnal creatures for whom color vision wasn't as important as sensitivity to dim light. Primates regained better color vision later, likely because it helped us spot ripe fruit in trees. Birds, by contrast, generally have excellent color vision, often seeing into the ultraviolet range where flowers and feathers have patterns invisible to us. Meanwhile, many deep-sea creatures have lost the ability to see color at all. In the eternal darkness of the deep ocean, where no sunlight penetrates, there are no colors to see, and evolution let those unnecessary structures fade away. Vision, like everything else, is sculpted by need and environment. Evolution gives you the senses your world requires, and takes away what's no longer useful. It's remarkably efficient in its patience, adding and subtracting across millions of years. The evolution of multicellularity, cells cooperating to form larger organisms, happened independently at least 25 times in Earth's history. Single-celled life is successful, abundant, and arguably dominant on Earth even now. But in certain circumstances, cells that stuck together had advantages. They could specialize, some cells handling nutrition, others reproduction, others defense. They could grow larger, which offered protection from predators. They could form structures that created new possibilities, like the ability to move purposefully or sense the environment in complex ways. But multicellularity requires cooperation, cells giving up their individual reproductive potential for the good of the organism. It requires communication between cells, coordination, shared purpose. In a sense, your body is a society of 37 trillion cells, all descended from a single fertilized egg, all cooperating to maintain the whole. You are a community in conversation with itself, a civilization whose citizens are microscopic, all working together without conflict or complaint, sustaining your existence from one breath to the next. Extinction is not failure. It's a natural part of evolution's story. The overwhelming majority of species that have ever existed, over 99%, are now extinct. Species arise, persist for a while, typically between 1 and 10 million years, and eventually disappear, leaving space for new forms. Extinction clears niches, creates opportunities, reshapes ecosystems in ways that allow new experiments in living. Without the extinction of the dinosaurs 66 million years ago, mammals would likely have remained small and marginal, and humans would never have evolved. Extinction and creation are partners in evolution's dance, neither good nor bad, just part of the ongoing flow. Even humanity, for all our apparent success, will someday end. Whether we evolve into something new or simply vanish, our moment in deep time will pass. That sounds sad, but in the context of evolution, it's simply the pattern. Everything has its time. Knowing that can make this moment feel more precious, more worth savoring, exactly as it is. Darwin spent decades observing barnacles, small, sessile crustaceans that attach themselves to rocks and ships. For 8 years, he studied, dissected, categorized, and described barnacle species, work that many considered tedious. But this deep focus gave Darwin a profound understanding of variation within species, how no two individuals are quite the same, how structures vary subtly, how species grade into one another without sharp boundaries. This patient observation of small details informed his later theory of evolution. There's a lesson in that kind of attention, that willingness to sit with the small and seemingly insignificant until it reveals its secrets. Evolution itself works through such incremental variations, a slightly longer beak here, a subtly different pattern there, tiny changes that only become significant across thousands of generations. The grand story of life is built from barnacles and beetles, from careful looking and patient thought. Sometimes the deepest understanding comes not from dramatic revelations but from quiet, sustained attention to what's right in front of you. Islands are evolution's laboratories. When organisms colonize an island, carried by wind, water, or chance, they often face environments very different from their mainland origins, with different predators, competitors, and food sources. Isolated populations evolve rapidly, adapting to their new homes. This is why islands often have unique species found nowhere else. The Galapagos finches that helped inspire Darwin's theory, lemurs in Madagascar, the strange birds of New Zealand that evolved flightlessness in the absence of mammalian predators, all are products of island evolution. The most dramatic example might be the Hawaiian Islands, where a single colonizing honeycreeper species diversified into more than 50 distinct species, each with differently shaped beaks specialized for different foods. Islands show evolution in fast forward, demonstrating how geographic isolation and new ecological pressures drive the branching of life's tree. Every island is a story of separation and transformation, of creatures becoming something new simply by being somewhere new, given enough time. You are taller than your ancestors. Human height has increased noticeably over the past few centuries, not because of evolution, That's far too short a time for genetic change. But because of improved nutrition, sanitation, and health care. This is an important distinction. Not all change is evolution. Evolution requires genetic change passed through reproduction. Individual organisms don't evolve, populations do, over generations. The changes you experience in your lifetime, the things you learn, the muscles you build, the scars you acquire, these don't pass to your children genetically. This was one of the key insights that separated Darwin's theory from earlier ideas like Lamarck's. Giraffes didn't get long necks by stretching for high leaves and passing that stretch to their offspring. Rather, in each generation, giraffes with slightly longer necks could reach more food, survived better, and reproduced more. So over countless generations, the average neck length increased. Evolution is patient. It doesn't rush. It works through the simple mathematical accumulation of small inherited advantages, generation after generation after generation. There's a concept in evolutionary biology called spandrels, borrowed from architecture. In architecture, a spandrel is the triangular space created when two arches meet. It's not designed for its own purpose, but is a necessary byproduct of the arches. In evolution, spandrels are traits that exist not because they were selected for, but as side effects of other traits. The redness of blood, for example, wasn't selected for its color. Hemoglobin happens to be red because of its iron content, and iron happens to be excellent at binding oxygen. Many aspects of organisms are like this. Not every trait exists because it provided an advantage. Some are simply consequences of chemistry, physics, or developmental processes. Understanding this helps us avoid the trap of thinking everything must have a purpose or that evolution plans ahead. Evolution is a tinkerer, not an engineer. It works with what's available, accepting side effects, making do, finding pathways forward that are good enough, not perfect. There's something relaxing in that imperfection, that acknowledgement that not everything needs a reason. The speed of evolution varies dramatically. Sometimes change happens relatively quickly. The famous peppered moths in Industrial Revolution England shifted from light-colored to dark-colored in just a few decades as pollution darkened tree trunks, making dark moths better camouflaged. Other times, change is glacially slow, species remaining stable for millions of years. The pace depends on many factors. Generation time, bacteria can evolve faster than elephants simply because they reproduce more quickly. Population size, environmental stability, mutation rates, and how much pressure the environment exerts. In times of rapid environmental change, climate shifts, new predators, new diseases, evolution accelerates because the pressure to adapt intensifies. In stable times, it slows to a crawl. Evolution has no fixed tempo. It moves like water, rushing fast over stones when the slope is steep, pooling calm and still in level places, always responsive to the landscape it moves through. Understanding this helps explain why we see both stability and change in the fossil record, both creatures unchanged for millions of years and dramatic transformations. Social learning, the ability to learn by watching others rather than only through individual trial and error, is a huge evolutionary advantage and appears in many intelligent species. Chimpanzees learn which plants have medicinal properties by watching their elders. Orcas teach their young specific hunting techniques that vary from pod to pod, creating distinct cultures. Japanese macaques in one region learn to wash sweet potatoes in streams, and that behavior spread and persisted, a cultural tradition passed down generations. Human beings have taken social learning to extraordinary heights. We accumulate knowledge across generations, building on what came before, creating what researchers call cumulative culture. You don't have to rediscover fire or the wheel or agriculture. You inherit them. This is partly why humans have been so successful. Our evolution isn't purely genetic anymore. It's also cultural. We can adapt to new environments not by waiting for genetic mutations, but by inventing tools, techniques, and social structures. Culture became a second engine of adaptation, running alongside and sometimes faster than genetic evolution. Many flowers and insects are locked in co-evolutionary relationships, so specific they can't survive without each other. Certain orchids have nectar spurs so deep that only one species of moth, with an improbably long tongue, can pollinate them. Darwin once examined an orchid with a nectar spur over a foot long and predicted, based on evolutionary logic, that there must exist a moth with a tongue that long, and decades later, that moth was discovered. Figs and fig wasps have a partnership going back tens of millions of years. Each fig species has its own wasp species that pollinates it, and the wasps can reproduce only inside that specific fig. These relationships are evolution's way of specializing, of finding niches within niches. But they're also fragile. If one species goes extinct, the partner may follow. Coevolution reminds us that no organism evolves in isolation. Every species exists in a web of relationships, shaped by and shaping its neighbors, creating an interconnected story where every thread matters. Viruses play a strange and significant role in evolution. Retroviruses, which insert their genetic material into host DNA, occasionally infect germ cells, eggs, or sperm, and their genes become part of the host's genome, passed down to offspring. Over millions of years, viral genes have accumulated in most organisms' DNA. Roughly 8% of your DNA came from ancient viral infections, now so old and changed they're no longer functional viruses but permanent passengers in your genome. Some of these viral remnants have been repurposed by evolution. One helps form the placenta in mammals, allowing mothers to nourish developing young without the immune system rejecting them. Viruses, typically thought of as enemies, have also been inadvertent contributors to evolutionary change, introducing new genetic material, sometimes causing mutations that lead to new traits. Evolution makes use of everything: accidents, invasions, catastrophes, finding ways to incorporate them into the ongoing story. Nothing is purely harmful across deep time. Even disasters can eventually become tools. In evolutionary terms, altruism is puzzling. If evolution rewards traits that help an organism survive and reproduce, why would an animal risk its life for others? Yet altruism appears throughout nature. Ground squirrels give alarm calls that alert others to predators, even though calling draws attention to themselves. Worker bees die to defend the hive. The solution to this puzzle lies in understanding that genes, not individuals, are what evolution acts upon. If helping relatives survive means your shared genes continue, altruism can be favored by natural selection. This is called kin selection. You share 50% of your genes with your siblings, 25% with your cousins, so helping them survive is, genetically speaking, helping yourself. Even beyond kin, reciprocal altruism can evolve. Help others now, receive help later, and both benefit over time. Evolution discovered that cooperation and self-sacrifice can be winning strategies, that sometimes the best way to ensure your genes continue is to support the community around you. Your capacity for kindness has deep evolutionary roots. It's not a weakness or a departure from nature. It is nature, one of its most successful strategies. The development of language is one of the most significant events in human evolution, though its origins are still debated. Language requires not just a brain capable of symbolic thought but also precise physical structures, a descended larynx, fine control over breathing, subtle tongue and lip movements. Chimpanzees lack these anatomical features, which is why they can't speak even if they can learn sign language. Some researchers think language evolved gradually, building on earlier primate communication. Others think it emerged relatively suddenly, perhaps due to a specific genetic mutation that enabled the complex grammar that makes human language unique. Regardless of how, language changed everything. It allowed humans to share detailed knowledge, coordinate complex activities, build shared myths and cultures, teach abstract concepts. Language turned individual human minds into something like neurons in a larger collective brain, networked and communicating. Every word you know is a small inheritance from thousands of years of linguistic evolution, shaped by generations of speakers, carrying within it echoes of all the people who used it before you. You're still here, and that's wonderful. Let yourself release any tension you might be holding. Your jaw, your shoulders, your hands, let them soften. Evolution moves in its own time, and so can you. There's no test, no need to remember any of this. Let the words be like rain on leaves, present and gentle and then past. Your breathing is its own ancient rhythm, unchanged since the first creatures pulled air into their bodies. Trust it. Trust your body's deep knowledge of rest. The story continues, but you can drift with it now, not holding on, just floating. One of the strangest evolutionary adaptations is bioluminescence, the ability of organisms to produce light. It evolved independently at least 40 times across different branches of life. In bacteria, fungi, jellyfish, fireflies, deep-sea fish, and many others. Each group uses slightly different chemistry to achieve the same glow. In the deep ocean, where sunlight never reaches, bioluminescence serves many purposes: attracting prey, confusing predators, communicating with potential mates. The anglerfish dangles a glowing lure to draw in food. The lanternfish has light organs on its belly that match the dim light from above, erasing its silhouette so predators below can't see it. Fireflies flash in species-specific patterns, a language of light for finding partners. Bioluminescence is evolution's solution to darkness, a way of making your own light when the world provides none. There's poetry in that. The idea that life, when faced with darkness, can simply decide to glow, to become its own small star, carrying brightness within itself. The human brain is extraordinarily large for our body size, using about 20% of our energy despite being only 2% of our body weight. This presents an evolutionary puzzle because brains are costly to maintain. They require enormous amounts of calories and nutrients, and giving birth to large-headed infants is risky. So why did human brains grow so large? The prevailing theories suggest it was driven by social complexity. Living in large social groups requires remembering who's who, tracking relationships and alliances, predicting others' behavior, navigating intricate social rules. Language, culture, and cooperation all reward greater cognitive capacity. Our brains didn't grow large to solve abstract math problems or build spaceships. Those are recent byproducts. They grew large to navigate the challenges of living with other humans, to cooperate and compete and communicate in increasingly complex ways. Your mind, with all its worries and hopes and memories, is shaped by millions of years of ancestors figuring out how to get along with each other. Metamorphosis is one of evolution's most dramatic inventions. A caterpillar essentially dissolves inside its cocoon, breaking down into a protein soup, and then reorganizes into a butterfly with a completely different body plan, different diet, different behaviors. How did such a bizarre strategy evolve? The advantage is specialization. The caterpillar form is optimized for eating and growing, while the butterfly form is optimized for reproduction and dispersal. By separating these life stages, insects can exploit different ecological niches without compromise. Many insects metamorphose: dragonflies, beetles, bees, flies, and each time it evolved, it opened new evolutionary possibilities. Metamorphosis is a reminder that transformation doesn't have to be gradual. Sometimes life takes you apart completely and rebuilds you into something new, and that's not a breakdown but a process, a strategy, a way of becoming. If you've ever felt like you were dissolving into uncertainty, perhaps that's just life's way of preparing you to emerge with wings. The fossil record shows that evolution often proceeds in bursts, not steady, gradual change. This pattern is called punctuated equilibrium, long periods of stability where species change very little stasis, interrupted by relatively brief periods of rapid change when new species appear. These bursts often coincide with environmental disruptions, climate changes, mass extinctions, geographic isolation. When environments are stable, species remain stable because they're well adapted. When something disrupts that balance, evolution accelerates as organisms scramble to adapt to new conditions. This pattern challenges the older view of evolution as slow and steady, showing instead that the pace is variable, responsive to circumstances. It also means that the absence of transitional fossils between some species isn't necessarily a gap in the record. The transitions may have happened relatively quickly in small, isolated populations that were less likely to fossilize. Evolution doesn't have a single rhythm. It syncopates, pauses, rushes, rests, a jazz improvisation across geological time. Every embryo in its development seems to briefly retrace aspects of its evolutionary history. Human embryos, for instance, have gill-like structures and a tail during early stages, echoes of our fishy and early mammalian ancestors. This observation, summarized in the phrase ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny, was overstated by early biologists but contains a kernel of truth. Development tends to conserve early stages and modify later ones, so embryos of related species often look more similar than adults do. The reason is that changing early developmental stages is usually catastrophic. Those stages build the basic body plan, while changing later stages can produce viable variation. Evolution, as usual, is conservative, retaining what works and tweaking around the edges. The fact that you, briefly, had structures resembling gills is a testament to your ancestry, a reminder that your body remembers, in its very construction, the journey from sea to land that your ancestors made hundreds of millions of years ago. Epigenetics is revealing that the boundary between heredity and environment is blurrier than once thought. While DNA sequence doesn't change during an organism's lifetime, chemical markers on DNA can change in response to environmental factors like diet, stress, or toxins, and some of these markers can be passed to offspring. This means experiences in one generation can, in limited ways, affect the next. Studies on humans who survived famine show their grandchildren had altered metabolism and disease susceptibility, even though the grandchildren never experienced famine themselves. This isn't Lamarckian evolution. The DNA sequence isn't changing, but it suggests a layer of inheritance beyond pure genetics, a way that organisms carry forward not just genes, but a molecular memory of recent environments. You inherit not only your ancestors' genes, but also, to some extent, their experiences, written in chemical annotations on the genome. Evolution is even more intricate than we knew, incorporating multiple layers of information, multiple timescales, responding to the immediate past even while carrying the deep past. Symbiosis is everywhere in nature, different species living together in close relationships that benefit one or both parties. Lichens are actually partnerships between fungi and algae or cyanobacteria, so intertwined they were long thought to be a single organism. Coral reefs are built by partnerships between coral animals and photosynthetic algae living in their tissues. Your digestive system hosts trillions of bacteria that help break down food and synthesize vitamins you can't make yourself. In fact, you have roughly as many bacterial cells in and on your body as you have human cells. You are not an individual but an ecosystem, a walking habitat supporting countless microbial lives that are, in turn, supporting yours. Evolution doesn't only produce competition, it produces cooperation, interdependence, relationships where the success of one depends on the success of another. The boundaries between self and other, between organism and environment, are far less clear than they appear. You are porous, relational, part of a larger community that has been negotiating terms of partnership for billions of years. Evolution can be witnessed in real time if you look at organisms with fast generation times. Bacteria develop antibiotic resistance within years. Insects evolve pesticide resistance. HIV evolves so rapidly that a single patient's infection diversifies significantly during the course of their illness. In the laboratory, scientists have watched E. coli bacteria evolve for decades across tens of thousands of generations, Observing them develop new capabilities, like the ability to metabolize citrate in oxygen-rich environments, something E. coli couldn't do before. These experiments confirm that the principles Darwin outlined are real and observable, not just historical inference. Evolution isn't just a story about the past. It's a process happening right now, all around you, in every population of every species, including humans. We are not evolution's endpoint or pinnacle. We are participants in an ongoing process, still being shaped by our environment, still changing, still part of life's vast, patient unfolding. Flight evolved independently 4 times, in insects, pterosaurs, birds, and bats. Each used different structures and strategies. Insects modified outgrowths of their exoskeletons into wings. Pterosaurs extended a single elongated finger to support a membrane wing. Birds developed feathers and restructured their entire forelimb. Bats stretched skin between elongated fingers. Despite these different paths, all converged on the basic requirements of flight: lightweight bodies, efficient energy use, strong muscles, excellent spatial awareness. Flight is difficult. It requires overcoming gravity with sustained effort. But the rewards are enormous. Access to food sources others can't reach, escape from predators, efficient long-distance travel. That it evolved 4 separate times shows how powerful those rewards are, how evolution will find a way to the same solution even from very different starting points. There's something hopeful in that, the idea that if something offers enough advantage, life will eventually discover it, no matter the obstacles. The sky called and life answered, again and again. Some species are what ecologists call keystone species. Their presence or absence dramatically affects the entire ecosystem. Sea otters, for example, eat sea urchins. Without otters, urchin populations explode and devour kelp forests, transforming rich underwater ecosystems into barren urchin barrens. Wolves in Yellowstone, reintroduced after being hunted to extinction there, changed the behavior of elk, which changed where plants grew, which changed river courses and bird populations and even the number of beavers. Ecosystems are complex webs where each strand affects others in cascading ways, and evolution has shaped these relationships over millennia. No species evolves alone. Each is embedded in a network of interactions, predators and prey, competitors and partners, all influencing each other's evolution in a process called coevolution. The web is fragile and resilient at once. Remove one strand and the whole structure shifts, adapts, finds a new balance, though the new balance may be diminished. You are part of such a web, and so is every organism alive, all connected, all necessary. The evolution of plant life on land was perhaps even more transformative than the evolution of animal life. Plants oxygenated the atmosphere, created soil by breaking down rocks with their roots, established entire ecosystems that provided habitats and food for animals. The first land plants, mosses and liverworts, appeared around 470 million years ago. They were followed by ferns, then by seed-bearing plants, and finally by flowering plants about 140 million years ago. Flowering plants, angiosperms, were revolutionary because they formed partnerships with insects and other animals for pollination, allowing much more efficient reproduction than wind pollination. This partnership drove an explosion of diversity. Plants evolved elaborate flowers in countless shapes, colors, and scents to attract specific pollinators, and insects co-evolved to specialize in specific flowers. Today, over 80% of plant species produce flowers. The world you see, full of color and bloom, is the result of millions of years of conversation between plants and pollinators, an ongoing negotiation written in petal and scent. One of the deepest insights of evolutionary biology is that complexity doesn't require a designer. It can emerge from simple rules repeated over vast timescales: variation, inheritance, and selection. Random mutations create variation. Offspring inherit traits from parents, passing on genetic information. Individuals with traits better suited to their environment are more likely to survive and reproduce, gradually shifting the population's characteristics. These principles, applied over millions of generations, can produce eyes, wings, brains, ecosystems, all without foresight or intention, just the accumulation of countless small changes, each building on what came before. There's a profound beauty in emergence, in the way complex, purposeful-seeming structures can arise from mindless processes given enough time. The universe doesn't need to know where it's going to create wonders. It just needs time, variation, and the patient, mathematical logic of what works continuing and what doesn't ending. You are one of those emergent wonders, a pattern that arose from simpler patterns, complexity built from simplicity across billions of years. Migration is one of nature's most spectacular phenomena and often has deep evolutionary roots. Monarch butterflies travel thousands of miles from North America to specific mountain regions in Mexico, a journey that takes multiple generations. No single butterfly completes the round trip, yet the population returns to the same small forests year after year, a destination their ancestors knew. Arctic terns migrate pole to pole, experiencing 2 summers each year and seeing more daylight than any other animal. Salmon return to the exact stream where they were born to spawn, navigating by smell across hundreds of miles of ocean. These behaviors are encoded genetically, instincts shaped by millions of years of evolution because the benefits, access to seasonal resources, favorable breeding grounds, outweighed the enormous costs and dangers of the journey. Migration reminds us that evolution works on scales larger than individual lives, programming behaviors that span continents and generations, connecting ecosystems across the globe in patterns older than mountains. Humans are unusual among mammals in several ways that reveal our evolutionary path. We walk upright, freeing our hands for tool use. We have relatively little body hair, possibly an adaptation to keep cool while running long distances in pursuit of prey, persistent hunting, outlasting faster animals by tracking them until they collapsed from heat exhaustion. We have unusually complex vocal apparatus allowing detailed speech. We mature slowly, with long childhoods allowing extended learning. We're one of the few mammals that can drink milk into adulthood, a trait that evolved independently in several populations after the domestication of cattle. We sweat profusely, effective for cooling but rare among mammals. Each of these traits tells a story about how we lived, what pressures shaped us, what strategies our ancestors used to survive. You are a collection of solutions to ancient problems, your body a museum of adaptations, each feature a response to a challenge faced thousands or millions of years ago. The evolution of sociality, living in groups, happened many times across many species because the advantages are compelling. Protection from predators through numbers and vigilance, cooperative hunting or foraging, care for young that increases survival, shared knowledge. But group living also brings challenges. Competition for resources within the group, disease transmission, need for communication and coordination. The most complex societies, like those of ants, bees, termites, and humans, evolved intricate systems to manage these challenges. Division of labor, hierarchies, communication systems, altruistic behaviors. Ant colonies function almost like single organisms, with queens as reproductive systems, workers as somatic cells, soldiers as immune systems. Human societies developed language, laws, culture, technology to coordinate at scales unprecedented in nature. Sociality is evolution's way of turning individuals into something larger than themselves, creating group-level structures that can solve problems individuals cannot. You are part of such a structure, a participant in a collective intelligence that emerged from evolution's experiments in cooperation. DNA evidence reveals surprising histories. All humans alive today descend from populations that lived in Africa as recently as 70,000 years ago. Genetic diversity is greater within Africa than in all populations outside Africa combined, because those who migrated out were small groups carrying only a subset of the total human genetic variation. This means that racial categories, which seem so important socially, are biologically almost meaningless. The genetic differences within any racial group are greater than the average differences between groups. We are one species, one family, separated by evolutionary eye blinks and superficial adaptations to climate like skin color and facial features. DNA also reveals that modern humans interbred with Neanderthals and Denisovans when they met outside Africa, so most non-African people carry small percentages of those species' DNA. We are not pure anything. We're mixtures, blends, the product of countless meetings and minglings across time. Your ancestry is a braided river, carrying water from many sources, all flowing from the same ancient spring. The concept of living fossils, organisms that seem unchanged for millions of years, can be misleading. Even when body plans remain stable, DNA shows these species continue to evolve genetically. The environment shapes them to maintain the same outward form because that form continues to work, but they're not static. Adaptation doesn't always mean visible transformation. Sometimes it means refining what already exists, adjusting internal chemistry, fine-tuning behaviors, maintaining relevance in a changing world without dramatic external change. This is true for individuals too, in a metaphorical sense. Growth doesn't always look like revolution. Sometimes it's subtle recalibration, quiet refinement, staying true to your essential form while adjusting to new circumstances. Evolution teaches patience with this kind of change, the kind that's invisible on the surface but profound beneath, the kind that preserves what's essential while allowing what's flexible to adapt. One of the most important developments in evolutionary history was the evolution of death itself, or more precisely, programmed aging. Single-celled organisms that reproduce by division are essentially immortal. The parent doesn't die, it becomes two offspring. But multicellular organisms with separate somatic and germ cells evolved aging and death. Why? One theory is that aging is a side effect of preventing cancer. Mechanisms that stop damaged cells from reproducing indefinitely also limit how many times healthy cells can divide. Another theory is that aging benefits the species by clearing space and resources for younger generations, allowing faster adaptation to changing environments. Whatever the reasons, sexual reproduction and mortal individuals became evolution's dominant strategy for complex life. Death isn't a flaw or failure. It's a feature, baked into the system, part of the engine that drives change. Knowing your time is limited is part of what makes your lineage adaptable, part of what allows life to continue evolving. In the context of deep time, your individual life is a single note in an endless song, brief and necessary. Take a deep breath in and let it out slowly. You're held safe here in this moment, wrapped in blankets, supported by the bed beneath you. The story of life is long, but your part right now is simple, just to rest, to let go, to allow sleep to come when it's ready. There's nothing you need to figure out or hold on to. Evolution has been unfolding for billions of years without any effort from you, and it will continue. Your only task is to be here, breathing, drifting at peace. Let everything soften. Let the words wash over you like distant waves. The placenta, which nourishes developing young in most mammals, is itself an evolutionary innovation with a fascinating history. Marsupials like kangaroos have a simpler placenta and give birth to very underdeveloped young that complete development in a pouch. Placental mammals evolved a more complex placenta that allows much longer gestation and more developed newborns. But here's the remarkable part. The genes that help form the placenta include repurposed viral genes from ancient retroviruses that infected mammalian ancestors millions of years ago. These viral genes help the placenta evade the mother's immune system, which would otherwise attack the fetus as foreign tissue. Evolution turned an ancient infection into an essential part of reproduction. This happens again and again. Old pieces repurposed for new functions, nothing wasted, everything potentially useful given enough time. Your own birth was made possible partly by viruses that infected your distant ancestors, their invasive genes now woven into the essential architecture of mammalian life. Sexual selection is a special type of natural selection that acts on traits related to attracting mates rather than survival. It explains many of nature's most extravagant features. The peacock's tail, too large and bright to be practical, exists because peahens prefer males with spectacular tails. The elaborate songs of many birds, the antlers of deer, the manes of lions, all are costly to produce and maintain, sometimes even reducing survival, but they evolved because they increased mating success. Darwin himself found sexual selection fascinating and somewhat puzzling, as it seemed to contradict the principle of efficiency. But evolution doesn't optimize for survival alone. It optimizes for reproduction. And if being extravagant helps an organism reproduce more successfully than being practical, extravagance wins. There's something almost playful about sexual selection, the way it produces beauty and excess, the way it values display and attraction. Evolution isn't only about grim survival. It's also about allure and art, about the power of being noticed and chosen. The human species, Homo sapiens, is just one branch of a once diverse family tree. For most of human evolutionary history, multiple hominin species coexisted. Homo erectus, Homo neanderthalensis, Homo floresiensis, Denisovans, and others overlapped in time and sometimes in space. They met, competed, interbred. But now we're alone, the last hominin species, and have been for about 40,000 years. The reasons our cousins went extinct while we survived are debated: climate change, competition, disease, or simply chance. But being the sole survivors is unusual. For millions of years, the world hosted many kinds of humans, and perhaps it felt less lonely, knowing there were others out there, different but related, exploring their own paths. Now we carry traces of them only in our DNA and in the fossils we excavate. This solitude is recent, and whether it's permanent or will someday diverge again into new species is a question for the far future. For now, we're all there is, all human, all responsible for what becomes of our lineage. Camouflage and mimicry are evolution's art forms. Stick insects look like twigs. Leaf insects look like leaves, complete with false veins and bite marks. Some caterpillars resemble bird droppings to avoid being eaten. The harmless viceroy butterfly mimics the toxic monarch butterfly, gaining protection because predators learn to avoid the pattern. Some orchids mimic female wasps so convincingly that male wasps try to mate with the flowers, pollinating them in the process. Camouflage evolves through predators consistently failing to spot well-hidden prey, and those prey surviving to reproduce, passing on their effective disguises, generation by generation, until the resemblance is astonishing. It's evolution as sculptor, refining shape and color and texture through millions of individual acts of looking and not seeing, until organisms become almost invisible or perfectly deceptive. There's a strange beauty in these deceptions, these shapes that fool the eye, reminding us that survival sometimes means becoming something you're not, wearing a mask so convincing even nature forgets it's there. The evolution of venom happened independently many times, in snakes, spiders, scorpions, jellyfish, cone snails, platypuses, even some shrews. Venom is modified saliva or other secretions, proteins that disrupt prey or predators, nervous systems, blood, or tissues. Each lineage evolved its own cocktail of toxins, targeting different physiological systems in different ways. Venom is expensive to produce metabolically, so it only evolves when the benefits, securing prey, deterring predators, outweigh the costs. What's fascinating is that venom components are being studied for medical uses. Compounds from cone snail venom have led to powerful painkillers. Snake venom proteins are being researched for blood pressure medications and cancer treatments. Once again, evolution's solutions to survival challenges turn out to have applications we never imagined. Nature has been experimenting with biochemistry for hundreds of millions of years, and there's still so much to learn from its results. So many potential medicines and insights hidden in the bodies of creatures trying simply to live. Evolutionary developmental biology, or evo, studies how changes in development lead to evolutionary changes in body plans. It turns out that many of the genes controlling basic body layout, where the head goes, how many limbs, the body's axis, are shared across vastly different animals. Flies and humans, for instance, share similar genes for building bodies, even though the results look nothing alike. Small changes in when and where these genes are active during development can produce dramatic differences in adult form. This explains how evolution can produce big changes without needing entirely new genes. It just tweaks the timing and expression of existing ones. A mutation that causes a gene to stay active slightly longer can add segments to an insect's body or extra bones to a vertebrate's limb. Evolution is a master of developmental timing, conducting an orchestra of genes, speeding some up, slowing others down, creating infinite variations on ancient themes. You and a fruit fly share more genetic music than you might think. The difference is in how the symphony is played. The Red Queen hypothesis, named after a character in Through the Looking Glass who says you must run as fast as you can just to stay in place, describes an evolutionary arms race. Parasites evolve to better infect hosts. Hosts evolve resistance. Parasites evolve counter-resistance. Predators get faster, prey get faster. Neither side gains permanent advantage. They simply co-evolve in a constant cycle of adaptation and counter-adaptation. This is one reason sexual reproduction persists despite its costs. It creates genetic variation that makes it harder for parasites to specialize. The Red Queen hypothesis suggests that much of evolution isn't about progress toward some goal, but simply about keeping up with everyone else who's also evolving. It's a treadmill, but a generative one, driving diversity and complexity without ever reaching a stable end state. There's something both exhausting and exhilarating about this. The idea that life is perpetual motion, perpetual adjustment. Every organism locked in countless slow-motion races with partners and enemies that will never truly end. Domestication is evolution driven by human selection instead of natural selection. Dogs evolved from wolves through our ancestors choosing the friendliest, most cooperative individuals to keep around, gradually transforming them over thousands of years into the astonishing diversity of dog breeds we have today. Cattle, chickens, wheat, corn, rice, all have been dramatically modified from their wild ancestors. Domesticated plants produce larger, more nutritious seeds or fruits. Domesticated animals are generally calmer, more tolerant of crowding, more dependent on humans. What's fascinating is that domestication often produces a suite of changes called domestication syndrome. Floppy ears, curled tails, patchy coat colors, reduced brain size, changes in skull shape. These traits appear across many domesticated species, suggesting that selecting for tameness affects development in ways that produce these physical side effects. Humans shaped these species, but in doing so we also shaped ourselves. Developing agriculture and animal husbandry changed human societies, diets, even our genes. Domestication is co-evolution at an accelerated pace, a partnership where both sides transformed. Your appendix, that small tube attached to your intestine, often dismissed as useless, may actually play a role as a reservoir for beneficial gut bacteria. When illness purges your intestines, bacteria in the appendix can survive and repopulate your system. But regardless of its current function, the appendix is a reminder that evolution doesn't design from scratch, it modifies what's already there. Your distant ancestors relied more heavily on plant material that required extended digestion, and the appendix, or rather, a larger cecum of which the appendix is a remnant, helped house bacteria for that purpose. As diets changed, the appendix became less essential but didn't entirely disappear. Evolution is conservative, slow to remove structures unless they become actively harmful. You carry in your body these small relics, structures that were important once and may be again, or may slowly fade over millions more years. You are a living history book, every organ and bone a page telling stories of who your ancestors were. Islands are fragile evolutionary laboratories. Because island species often evolve in the absence of predators or competitors present on mainlands, they become specialized, sometimes losing defensive traits. Flightless birds evolved on islands where there were no ground predators: the dodo in Mauritius, the moa in New Zealand, the Galapagos cormorant. When humans arrived with rats, cats, and other invasive species, many island species went extinct because they had no evolved defenses. Island extinctions remind us that evolution adapts organisms to specific contexts, and when those contexts change suddenly, adaptation can't keep pace. It takes thousands of generations to evolve defenses, but destruction can happen in years. Conservation biology is, in part, trying to protect species from changes too rapid for evolution to answer. The loss of island species is a loss of unique evolutionary experiments, pathways life took that can never be repeated. Each extinction is a library burning, knowledge vanishing that took millions of years to write. Eusociality, complex societies with reproductive division of labor, is rare in evolution, but when it appears, it's often spectacularly successful. Ants, bees, wasps, termites, and 2 species of mole rats are eusocial, living in colonies where most individuals don't reproduce, but instead help raise the offspring of a queen. This requires extraordinary cooperation and often involves close genetic relatedness, so that by helping the queen, workers are still promoting their own genes. Eusocial insects dominate many ecosystems. Ants alone represent about 15 to 20% of terrestrial animal biomass. Humans are sometimes called eusocial too, though less strictly. We have extensive cooperation beyond kin groups, division of labor, culture, and institutions that outlive individuals. Our success as a species is rooted in cooperation at scale, in our ability to work together with non-relatives toward common goals. Evolution favors individuals, but it also favors collectives when cooperation unlocks resources individuals can't access alone. Your achievements are not yours alone. They're made possible by the vast cooperative structure of human society, an evolutionary strategy millions of years in the making. Evolution has no foresight, no plan, no ultimate goal. It simply responds to the present moment. What survives now? What reproduces now? This means evolution can't prepare for future challenges. If conditions change too quickly, species may go extinct before adaptation can occur. It also means evolution can produce traits that are beneficial in the short term, but costly long term. Bacteria evolving antibiotic resistance gain an immediate advantage, but may find those resistance mechanisms costly when antibiotics aren't present. Humans evolved strong cravings for sugar and fat, beneficial when food was scarce, but problematic in environments of abundance. Evolution is blind to the future, working only with what's immediately favored. Understanding this helps explain why evolution doesn't always produce optimal outcomes. It produces what works right now, and right now is the only time frame evolution can see. This short-sightedness is simply the nature of the process, neither good nor bad, just a fundamental limit on how adaptation works. The Great Rift Valley in East Africa is often called the cradle of humanity, because many of our earliest hominin fossils were found there. The valley formed as tectonic plates pulled apart, creating a diverse landscape of lakes, rivers, forests, and grasslands that may have driven human evolution. The variability hypothesis suggests that environmental instability, shifting between wet and dry periods, forests expanding and contracting, favored hominin adaptability, intelligence, tool use, and social cooperation. Those who could adjust to changing conditions survived. Specialists tied to one environment went extinct during shifts. This may be why humans are so adaptable, able to live in nearly every terrestrial environment from Arctic tundra to tropical rainforest to deserts. We're not the strongest or fastest, but we're remarkably flexible, capable of learning and adjusting and inventing our way through challenges. That flexibility has roots in landscapes that never stayed the same, that demanded constant adjustment and rewarded those who could improvise. The very ground shaped us, its restlessness teaching ours. Convergent evolution shows that certain environments reliably produce certain solutions. Deserts on different continents produce similar-looking succulents. Rainforests produce similar canopy structures and vine-draped trees. Aquatic predators from different lineages, sharks, dolphins, ichthyosaurs, develop similar streamlined shapes. This suggests there are optimal designs for given challenges, and evolution, given enough time and variation, tends to discover them. But convergence has limits. Organisms carry the constraints of their ancestry. A bird will never evolve wheels no matter how advantageous wheels might be, because there's no incremental path from feet to wheels through viable intermediate stages. Evolution is constrained by history, by what's possible through gradual modification. It's creative but not infinitely so. It works with the materials at hand, the body plans already in existence, finding clever variations within those constraints. Understanding these limits makes evolution's achievements even more impressive, not designing from imagination, but discovering brilliant solutions through tiny modifications across countless generations. Your sense of disgust towards certain things, rotten food, feces, certain smells, is an evolved adaptation that helps you avoid disease. Populations that felt disgust toward contaminated food and waste had lower rates of infection and higher survival. Disgust is ancient, appearing in many animals in forms like taste aversion. But in humans, disgust expanded beyond disease avoidance into moral and social domains. We feel disgusted by violations of social norms, moral transgressions, sometimes even by outgroups. This expansion may have helped enforce group cohesion and cooperation by making norm violations viscerally unpleasant. Emotions that seem purely personal or subjective often have evolutionary roots, shaped because they promoted survival or reproduction in ancestral environments. Your feelings are not arbitrary. They're part of an ancient guidance system, still operating according to rules that were written long before cities or writing or modern life, still trying to keep you safe using the logic of a much older world. The evolution of warm-bloodedness endothermy in mammals and birds was a major evolutionary shift that required many coordinated changes. Maintaining constant high body temperature takes enormous energy. Endotherms need to eat far more than similar-sized ectotherms, cold-blooded animals. But the advantages are significant. Activity in cold environments, sustained high activity levels, more effective brains and sensory systems. The evolution of endothermy likely happened gradually, with intermediate stages where animals had some temperature regulation but not the full constant control. Hair and feathers, initially for insulation, became essential for retaining metabolic heat. Increased metabolic rate required more efficient hearts and lungs. Everything had to evolve together, each change enabling the next. This is a common theme in evolution. Complex systems don't evolve all at once but through many small steps, each useful on its own, gradually accumulating into transformative change. Your body's ability to maintain a steady warm temperature, something you rarely think about, required millions of years of incremental refinements. Every fossil is a minor miracle. The vast majority of organisms decompose completely, leaving no trace. For a fossil to form, an organism must die in the right place, usually where sediment can quickly bury it, protecting it from scavengers and decay. Then, over immense time, minerals must permeate the remains, replacing organic material with stone, preserving shape and sometimes intricate detail. The fossilized organism must then survive geological processes, not being melted by volcanic activity, not being eroded away, not being crushed beyond recognition. Finally, erosion or excavation must expose the fossil at a time when humans are around to find it. Each fossil you see in a museum beat astronomical odds. Most species that ever lived left no fossils at all. The ones we've found are precious not just for what they tell us but as survivors of deep time, ambassadors from lost worlds. When you look at a fossil, you're seeing something that defeated entropy, that remained while mountains rose and fell. A message preserved across unimaginable spans of time. Evolution is sometimes described as a tree, with branches diverging from common ancestors, but a more accurate metaphor might be a braided stream or a web. Species don't only diverge, they sometimes converge, interbreed, exchange genes through horizontal transfer, especially in microbes, and influence each other through coevolution. The tree of life is tangled, interconnected, with branches occasionally fusing back together. Hybrids like mules, horse-donkey crosses, or ligers, lion-tiger crosses, are usually infertile, but sometimes hybrid individuals can reproduce, and occasionally hybridization produces new species. Many plants are hybrids or polyploids, having multiple sets of chromosomes, formed through cross-species mating. Life's history is less a cleanly branching tree and more a network, a conversation where different lineages exchange ideas, occasionally merge, influence each other's paths. You are a node in that network, connected backward through time to every organism that came before, and forward through whatever comes after, part of a living web that's still being woven. Feel the rhythm of your breath. In and out, nothing to chase, nothing to solve. Your body knows how to rest. It's been doing it since the first living things pulsed in ancient seas. Let yourself trust that knowledge. The facts will keep coming soft and steady, but you don't have to hold on to them. They're here to carry you gently towards sleep like a river carrying a leaf. You're safe. You're comfortable. You can let go completely now. Just drift. Just breathe. The nervous system, which allows organisms to sense and respond to their environment, evolved from simple beginnings. The earliest animals with nervous systems were likely similar to modern cnidarians like jellyfish, with nerve nets that allowed coordinated movement but no central brain. As animals became more complex, nervous systems centralized, with clusters of neurons forming ganglia and eventually brains. Brains allowed faster processing, memory, learning, complex behaviors. But even the most sophisticated brain operates on principles established billions of years ago. Neurons communicating through electrical and chemical signals, networks of cells coordinating to produce behavior. Your thoughts right now, the feeling of blankets, the memory of your day, all arise from the activity of neurons, cells that trace their lineage back to the first simple nerve nets in ancient seas. Consciousness itself, that mysterious sense of being, emerges from biological processes shaped by evolution, the universe becoming aware of itself through patterns of electrochemical activity. Tool use is not unique to humans, though we've taken it to unprecedented levels. Chimpanzees use rocks to crack nuts, sticks to fish termites from mounds, and leaves as sponges to soak up water. New Caledonian crows craft hooks from twigs to extract insects from crevices, and even teach their young how to make these tools. Sea otters use rocks to smash open shellfish. Dolphins use marine sponges to protect their noses while foraging on rough seafloors. Tool use evolves when the benefits, access to otherwise unreachable food, outweigh the cognitive and physical costs of learning and using tools. Humans crossed a threshold where tools became so central that they shaped our evolution. Hands suited for precise grip, shoulders allowing accurate throwing, brains capable of planning and teaching complex sequences. Tools and minds co-evolved, each driving the other's refinement. You are a tool-using ape, and your ability to extend your body's capabilities with objects is one of your most defining features, inherited from ancestors who first picked up stones millions of years ago. The evolution of multicellular complexity required solving the problem of cancer. In a multicellular body, cells must cooperate, not competing to reproduce. But cells that mutate to ignore growth controls and reproduce selfishly become cancer. Complex organisms evolved many defenses: genes that detect DNA damage and trigger cell death, immune cells that destroy abnormal cells, telomeres that limit cell division. Elephants, which have far more cells than humans and live long lives, have extra copies of tumor suppressor genes, giving them greater cancer resistance. Naked mole rats almost never get cancer, thanks to a unique mechanism involving a special sugar in their tissues. Cancer is essentially evolution at the cellular level, cells mutating and being selected for their ability to divide, working against the interests of the organism. Our bodies are constantly fighting this internal evolutionary conflict, and mostly winning, a testament to billions of years of evolution refining mechanisms to maintain cooperation among cells. Your body is a peaceful society, and its peace is maintained by ancient, vigilant defenses. Sexual dimorphism, differences in appearance between males and females of a species, varies wildly across life. In some species, males and females are nearly indistinguishable. In others, they're so different they were once classified as separate species. Anglerfish have extreme sexual dimorphism. Females are large predators while males are tiny and live as parasites attached to females, eventually fusing into them and losing most organs except testes. In birds of paradise, males are dazzling with elaborate plumage and perform intricate dances, while females are drab and practical. In seahorses, sex roles reverse. Males carry and birth young. These differences evolve based on reproductive strategies and sexual selection. When female choice drives male mating success, males often evolve showy traits. When males compete physically for females, size and weaponry evolve. When parental investment is equal, dimorphism is minimal. There's no universal rule. Evolution explores every possibility, finding what works in each context, creating a spectrum of possibilities for how two sexes can exist and relate. Evolutionary medicine applies evolutionary principles to understand health and disease. Many modern illnesses result from mismatches between our evolved biology and modern environments. We evolved as active hunter-gatherers eating varied, nutrient-dense, fibrous diets, but now many people are sedentary and eat processed foods high in sugars and fats. We evolved in small social groups with face-to-face interaction, but now experience isolation or overwhelming urban crowds. We evolved in natural light-dark cycles, but now are exposed to artificial light at all hours. These mismatches contribute to obesity, diabetes, depression, sleep disorders, autoimmune diseases. Understanding evolution doesn't just explain our past, it helps illuminate our present, suggesting how to align modern life more closely with what our bodies expect. Evolutionary medicine doesn't offer quick fixes but provides context, helping us understand why certain conditions are so common and what underlying needs might not be met. You're an ancient body in a modern world, and sometimes simply recognizing that mismatch can be the beginning of compassion and adjustment. Extinction events, devastating as they are, also create opportunities. After the dinosaurs died out, mammals radiated into the ecological niches dinosaurs once filled, eventually producing whales, bats, elephants, primates, and countless other forms. After the Permian extinction that killed 96% of species, the survivors diversified into the Mesozoic era's rich ecosystems. Mass extinctions are followed by periods of rapid evolution as the survivors adapt to emptier worlds with abundant resources and open niches. This doesn't justify extinctions or minimize their tragedy. Each extinction is a loss of unique lineages, evolutionary experiments that can never be rerun. But it illustrates evolution's resilience, its capacity to rebuild even after catastrophe. Life as a whole has survived every mass extinction Earth has thrown at it across 500 million years. Individual species vanish, but life continues, finding new forms, new pathways, new ways of being. In the longest view, life is remarkably persistent, a force that once started refuses to completely stop. The evolution of parental care varies enormously across species and represents a trade-off between quantity and quality of offspring. Fish may produce thousands of eggs and provide no care, betting on sheer numbers. Mammals typically produce few offspring but invest heavily in each: gestation, nursing, teaching, protection. Birds are somewhere in between, often producing several eggs and caring intensely for hatchlings. The strategy that evolves depends on environmental pressures. In stable, competitive environments, quality often wins. In unpredictable or harsh environments, quantity may be better. Humans are at the extreme end of parental investment: long pregnancies, helpless infants, extended childhoods requiring years of feeding, teaching, and protection. This investment is part of why human brains grow so large and why culture is so important. Children have time to learn complex skills from parents and community. The love you may have felt from caregivers, or that you feel toward your own children or young people in your life, is not just emotion. It's an evolutionary strategy, a pattern of care refined over millions of years because it worked, because invested offspring survived and thrived. The concept of vestigial structures, body parts that no longer serve their original function, provides evidence of evolution. Whales have tiny pelvic bones, remnants of leg bones from when their ancestors walked on land. Pythons and boas have small spurs where hind legs used to be. Flightless birds have wings they don't use for flight. Humans have a tailbone coccyx, the fused remnants of a tail our ancestors had. These structures exist not because they're useful now, but because evolution modifies existing structures rather than building from scratch. They're echoes of the past, proof that organisms carry their history within them. Vestigial doesn't always mean useless. Structures can be repurposed. Whale hip bones anchor reproductive organs. Human tailbones anchor pelvic floor muscles. But their origins lie elsewhere, in other lives, other needs. You are a palimpsest, an old text written over but with earlier words still faintly visible beneath. Evolutionary psychology attempts to understand human behavior and cognition through the lens of evolution, proposing that many psychological traits were adaptive in ancestral environments. Why do we form tight social bonds? Because cooperation increased survival. Why do we fear snakes and spiders more than cars or electrical outlets, even though the latter are more dangerous? Because snakes and spiders were threats for millions of years, while cars are recent. Why do we find certain landscapes, open grasslands with scattered trees and water sources, universally appealing? Perhaps because they resemble the African savannas where humans evolved. Evolutionary psychology is controversial and must be approached carefully. Not every behavior has an adaptive explanation, and evolutionary stories can be misused to justify harmful biases. But at its best, it offers insights into why we feel and behave in certain ways, grounding psychology in biology and history. Your anxieties, desires, joys, they're not random. They have roots, some shallow in your personal history, others deep in the history of your species. One of the most remarkable partnerships in evolution is between flowering plants and pollinators. Flowers evolved colors, scents, and nectar to attract insects, birds, and bats. In return, these animals carry pollen from flower to flower, enabling plant reproduction. This mutualism drove incredible diversification. Flowers evolved into thousands of shapes specialized for different pollinators. Long tubular flowers for hummingbirds, white night-blooming flowers for moths, bright complex flowers for bees. Pollinators evolved specialized tongues, vision, and behaviors to exploit specific flowers. Some relationships are so specific that one species depends entirely on the other. Certain figs can only be pollinated by certain wasps, certain orchids only by certain moths. These partnerships are millions of years old, shaped by coevolution, each side adapting to the other. The flower garden or wildflower meadow is not just pretty. It's a community of ancient agreements, relationships written in scent and color, a conversation between kingdoms of life. The pace of human evolution has arguably accelerated in the past 10,000 years since agriculture began. Lactose tolerance in adulthood evolved independently in multiple populations that domesticated dairy animals. European, African, and Middle Eastern populations developed mutations allowing them to digest milk beyond infancy. Populations living at high altitudes, like Tibetans and Andeans, evolved different adaptations to low oxygen. Tibetans have increased blood flow. Andeans have higher oxygen-carrying capacity. Populations in malarial regions carry sickle cell trait, which provides resistance at the cost of potential anemia. These are recent adaptations, evolution in fast forward, driven by rapid environmental changes humans created through agriculture, animal domestication, and settlement in new environments. Evolution didn't stop when humans developed culture and technology. It continued, now acting on new pressures. You are still evolving, part of a process that hasn't paused, though you won't live to see its outcomes. The future human, if there is one, will be different from you in ways subtle and profound. There's a concept called evolutionary constraints, which are limits on what evolution can produce. Some constraints are physical. You can't evolve to fly by flapping your arms because human arms lack the muscle and bone structure needed. Some are developmental. Changing early developmental stages often causes catastrophic failure, so those stages are conserved across species. Some are historical. Evolution can only modify what already exists, so you're stuck with the basic mammalian body plan. Some are genetic. Certain mutations are lethal or produce no viable offspring, closing off certain evolutionary paths. These constraints mean evolution explores a subset of all possible organisms, not every conceivable form. But within those constraints, the diversity is still staggering. Constraints aren't just limitations. They're also channels that guide creativity, like how poetic forms constrain word choice but produce beauty within those limits. Evolution, working within its constraints, has produced every living thing you've ever seen, every wonder of the natural world. And you, right here, listening, breathing, beautifully constrained and beautifully free within those constraints. The immune system is an evolutionary battleground. Pathogens, bacteria, viruses, fungi, parasites, evolve to infect hosts. Hosts evolve defenses. Pathogens evolve countermeasures. This arms race has been going on for as long as multicellular life has existed. Your immune system is astonishingly complex. Innate defenses like skin barriers and inflammatory responses, adaptive immunity that learns and remembers specific pathogens. The adaptive immune system generates millions of different antibodies randomly, then selects and amplifies the ones that happen to match invaders. Evolution in miniature, happening in your body in days rather than millennia. Some pathogens evolve to hide from the immune system, disguising themselves with molecules that resemble host tissues. HIV attacks immune cells directly. Influenza mutates rapidly so antibodies from one year don't recognize the next year's strain. Your body is a site of constant evolutionary conflict, usually won by your defenses, but always contested. Every infection you've survived is a small victory in an ancient war. Kin selection explains seemingly selfless behaviors by recognizing that helping relatives survive helps your own genes continue. J.B.S. Haldane once joked he'd give his life for 2 brothers or 8 cousins, reflecting the genetic math that siblings share 50% of genes, cousins 12.5%. Prairie dogs give alarm calls that alert relatives even at risk to themselves. Bees and ants, which have unusual genetics making sisters more related to each other than to potential offspring, evolved extreme altruism where workers forego reproduction entirely. Kin selection extends the concept of fitness from individual survival to inclusive fitness. Your genetic success includes your relatives' success. This framework helps explain familial love, why parents sacrifice for children, why extended families cooperate. The deep bonds you feel toward family aren't just cultural. They're also evolutionary, ancient strategies encoded in your biology, whispering that taking care of your kin is, in genetic terms, taking care of yourself. The concept of an evolutionary stable strategy, S, helps explain why certain behaviors persist. A strategy is evolutionarily stable if, when most of the population adopts it, no alternative strategy can invade. For example, in many species, a mix of aggressive and cautious individuals persists because when most are aggressive, being cautious avoids costly fights. When most are cautious, being aggressive wins easy victories. Neither strategy dominates, they balance. This applies to humans too. We see diversity in personalities, risk tolerance, social strategies, because different approaches succeed in different contexts, and a population with variation is more resilient than one where everyone behaves identically. The fact that people are different, that no single personality type dominates, may reflect deep evolutionary logic. Diversity itself is adaptive. Your way of being, whatever it is, fits into a larger pattern, a balance. where many strategies coexist because the world rewards different approaches at different times. Evolutionary theory explains aging through several mechanisms. One is mutation accumulation. Harmful mutations that only express late in life aren't strongly selected against because they don't affect reproduction, so they accumulate. Another is antagonistic pleiotropy. Genes that benefit you early in life may harm you later, and natural selection favors early benefits over late costs. A third is the disposable soma theory. Bodies are vehicles for passing on genes, and investing too much in maintaining the body diverts resources from reproduction, so evolution balances longevity against fertility. These aren't cheerful thoughts, but they explain why aging is universal among sexually reproducing organisms. Evolution doesn't care about lifespan beyond reproductive years. But understanding this can shift perspective. Your body was built for reproduction and raising young, and if you're past those stages, the rest is, in evolutionary terms, bonus time, free from the calculus of selection, yours to spend as you choose. Aging is not failure. It's the expected endpoint of a process optimized for other goals, and knowing that can bring a kind of peace. Evolutionary convergence sometimes produces structures so similar it's hard to believe they evolved independently. The camera eye, with a lens focusing light onto a retina, evolved separately in vertebrates and cephalopods, octopuses, squid. They're not homologous. They formed from different developmental origins, yet they're remarkably similar in function and structure because there are only so many good solutions to the problem of focusing light to create detailed images. This happens at smaller scales too. The same biochemical pathways evolve independently, the same body shapes in similar environments. Evolution is not infinitely creative. It's constrained by physics, chemistry, and available materials. But within those constraints, it repeatedly discovers optimal designs. There's something comforting in that predictability, the idea that the universe has favorite solutions, shapes that work so well that life finds them over and over, as if the very laws of nature have preferences written into them, and evolution is simply reading that hidden text. The human appendix, tailbone, wisdom teeth, and goosebumps are often cited as vestigial, but the picture is more nuanced. Wisdom teeth were useful when our ancestors' diets wore down teeth and jaws were larger. Goosebumps made our hairier ancestors' fur stand up for insulation or to appear larger when threatened. The tailbone anchors muscles even though we don't have a tail. These structures remain because evolution doesn't perfect or clean up. It's satisficing, finding good enough, not optimal. If a structure isn't actively harmful, there's little pressure to eliminate it, and complete elimination takes millions of years. These evolutionary hangovers are reminders of who we were, markers of the journey. They're not mistakes but fossils within you, parts that tell the story of your lineage. You're not a finished product but a work in progress, shaped by the past, adapting to the present, open to the future. Evolution never stops editing, and you are the current draft of a story billions of years in the writing. Let go of trying to follow the words. You don't need to understand or remember anything at all. The facts are here just to give your mind something soft to rest on as you slip deeper into relaxation. Your body is heavy, warm, comfortable. Each breath is easier than the last. There's nothing left to do tonight. No tasks, no thoughts that need your attention. Just this moment, this quiet, this gentle drifting. You're exactly where you should be, and sleep is close now, waiting with open arms. Let yourself fall into it. The genetics of behavior are complex. Few behaviors are controlled by single genes. Most involve many genes interacting with environment. Even traits that seem straightforward, like height, are influenced by hundreds of genetic variants, each contributing a tiny amount. Behavior is even more complex, shaped by genes, development, learning, and context. There's often no gene for a behavior, but rather genetic variations that slightly increase or decrease tendencies under certain conditions. This complexity means that genetic determinism, the idea that genes rigidly control outcomes, is wrong. You're not simply executing a genetic program. You're the product of ongoing interaction between your genome and your environment, with outcomes influenced but not determined by either alone. There's freedom in that space between genes and expression, room for choice, learning, change. Understanding genetics doesn't trap you in predestination. It reveals the dance between inheritance and experience that makes you who you are. Evolutionary arms races occur not just between species, but within them. Males and females of the same species often have conflicting reproductive interests, leading to sexually antagonistic coevolution. Male fruit flies evolve seminal proteins that reduce female lifespan but increase short-term egg production, benefiting the male's reproduction at the female's expense. Females evolve resistance. Male water striders evolve structures to grasp reluctant females. Females evolve counterstructures to resist. This conflict drives rapid evolution of reproductive traits and can contribute to speciation as populations diverge in the outcomes of these conflicts. Not all of nature is harmonious cooperation. Sometimes even reproduction is contested, a negotiation where each party evolves to serve its own interests. Recognizing this doesn't diminish life's beauty, but adds layers of complexity, showing that evolution operates at multiple levels simultaneously, balancing and rebalancing endlessly shifting tensions. Horizontal gene transfer, movement of genetic material between organisms outside of reproduction, is common in bacteria and has profound implications. Bacteria can acquire genes from other bacteria, even distantly related ones, through viruses or direct DNA uptake. This is how antibiotic resistance spreads so quickly. One bacterium evolves resistance, and the gene transfers to others, sometimes across species boundaries. Horizontal transfer challenges the simple tree of life model because it means branches can merge and exchange genetic information. In multicellular organisms, horizontal transfer is rarer but still occurs, sometimes mediated by viruses. Some of your own genes likely arrived via ancient horizontal transfers. Evolution, particularly in microbes, is less like a branching tree and more like a web where threads cross and recross, information flowing not just vertically through descent, but horizontally through genetic exchange. Life shares knowledge, swapping solutions to problems, collaborating at the molecular level. Evolutionary lag can leave organisms with traits that no longer fit their environment. Ostriches and emus have wings but don't fly. Their ancestors did, but on predator-free islands or open plains, flight became less necessary and the energy cost too high, so they evolved into flightless runners instead. Their wings remain, reduced but present, useful now for balance or courtship displays. Evolutionary lag is everywhere. Pandas have carnivore digestive systems but eat bamboo, a poor nutritional match. Humans crave sugar intensely even when surrounded by it. These mismatches can cause problems, but they're also evidence of history, of change still underway. Evolution never achieves perfect fit because environments keep changing and adaptation always lags behind. You live in that lag, carrying forward traits suited to past worlds, doing your best in the present, moving slowly toward futures unknowable. There's grace in accepting that imperfect fit, that constant adjustment, as simply the nature of being alive in changing time. Life's complexity doesn't require miraculous explanations because complexity emerges gradually. The bacterial flagellum, often cited as too complex to have evolved, actually has evolutionary precursors. Simpler structures that serve different functions, secretion systems, attachment structures were co-opted and modified. The blood clotting cascade with its many interlocking proteins evolved stepwise, each component adding refinement to simpler earlier systems. Eyes evolved from light-sensitive spots to pits to pinhole cameras to lensed cameras, each stage functional and advantageous. Complexity builds not all at once but through accumulation, each small addition preserved if useful, gradually constructing systems that seem impossibly intricate. The marvel is that complexity exists. It's that time and variation and selection are sufficient to build it, no designer needed, just math and chemistry and billions of years. You are the product of such accumulation, a system of astonishing complexity built from simple rules applied across deep time. The future of human evolution is uncertain. Technology and medicine reduce natural selection by allowing nearly everyone to survive and reproduce. But evolution hasn't stopped. It's just acting on different pressures. Perhaps traits related to disease resistance, metabolism, or even behavioral tendencies continue to shift. Cultural evolution now far outpaces genetic evolution. Humans adapt to new environments by inventing tools and social structures, not by waiting for genetic change. Genetic engineering may soon allow directed changes, intentionally altering the human genome, moving from natural selection to artificial selection applied to ourselves. Whether that's wise remains debated. What's clear is that humans have become agents of their own evolution in unprecedented ways. You live at a hinge point in history, where the processes that created you are becoming subject to your own choices, where evolution's future direction might be partly steered by conscious minds rather than blind selection. It's thrilling, sobering, and utterly uncertain. And here we are, near the end of our journey through the gentle, patient story of life. We've drifted through billions of years together, from the first stirrings in ancient oceans to the complex web of existence that surrounds you now. We've seen how change happens slowly, incrementally, without hurry or force, how every living thing is related, how adaptation isn't a ladder but a river with countless branches, each finding its own path through time. Evolution isn't just a scientific theory, it's a way of seeing. It reminds us that nothing is static, that everything alive is part of an ongoing process, that you are connected to the farthest reaches of life through unbroken chains of ancestry. It teaches patience, showing that meaningful change happens across timescales so vast they make human concerns feel small, held in a larger context. It reveals resilience, the way life has endured catastrophes and continued, always finding a way forward. Most of all, evolution is humbling. You are not separate from nature but deeply embedded in it. Your body carries the history of life in its structures. Your genome holds ancient viral DNA. Your cells contain bacteria that became organelles billions of years ago. You are not an individual but a community, not an endpoint but a moment in a continuing process, not above the rest of life but one expression of it, unique and valuable and temporary. As you lie here now, your body is performing evolutionary miracles without thought. Your heart beats in a rhythm refined over hundreds of millions of years. Your lungs extract oxygen using structures inherited from the first air breathers. Your immune system fights microscopic battles using strategies older than flowering plants. Even your capacity to rest, to sleep, to let go and trust the darkness. That's ancient too, a pattern life discovered long ago. A recognition that renewal requires release, that not every moment is for striving. I hope these facts have given you some comfort, some sense of being held by deep time, some appreciation for the long, beautiful, patient unfolding that brought you here. You are the result of countless small moments of survival, adaptation, reproduction, each of your ancestors succeeding just enough to pass life forward to the next generation. You carry that unbroken chain within you, and someday perhaps you'll pass it forward too, in children or in the ways you affect the world, adding your own small link to the endless chain. But for now, there's nothing to do but rest. Let yourself sink into sleep, knowing you're part of something vast and old and ongoing, something that doesn't need you to understand it or remember it. Evolution will continue its slow work while you sleep, cells dividing, proteins folding, genes being read and copied, the ancient machinery of life maintaining you without any effort on your part. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for letting these words accompany you toward rest. If you enjoyed this journey, consider subscribing so you can return whenever you need this kind of peace, this gentle perspective. But don't worry about it now, just sleep. Let the story continue without you for a while. Let yourself dissolve into darkness, into rest, into the deep, dreamless peace that all living things need and seek. You're safe. You're held by billions of years of life's continuity. You're exactly what you should be. A temporary pattern of matter and energy, conscious for a brief moment, precious because you're fleeting, beautiful because you're part of the flow. Good night. Sleep well. And when you wake, you'll still be part of the story, still evolving, still connected to everything that lives, still carrying forward the ancient spark that has never gone out since life first began. Rest now. The universe will keep turning. Evolution will keep working. And you can just be peacefully until morning comes.